Legendary Movie Pitch. My Pitch for the Ages. Episode 2. From Part 1, The Wisdom. In the wide and barren desert of Gerudo, not far from its northeastern border, where the desert meets Faran region, 4 of the King of Hyrule's scouts sit on their horses facing the wide-open sands and bunkers around them. With a clear feeling of tension in the air, the 4 men gaze around cautiously and sometimes towards each other for direction. They can feel an airy and sinister presence hiding somewhere. Suddenly, one of them catches sight of something. It clearly fills him with alarming dread. On seeing his suddenly acute stance, the other scouts turn to look towards the rock he seems fixated with. And then they see it too. From behind the rock, an imposing 4-legged beast has emerged. Although the beast is still in the distance, they can clearly see that the beast is not like any they've seen before. It has a mane and the features of a big cat of some sort, an impossibly muscular frame. But its scariest feature is the fact that it also has 2 arms as well as its 4 legs. And in one of its hand, it is wielding what seems a huge curved sword, as well as a bow, larger than their entire torsos hanging on his back. The beast clearly has its sights set on the scouts, and soon it begins charging towards them. With gallops that would impress the most thoroughbred of stallions, the beast's legs hurl it towards the men, who are now either turning their horses to flee or deciding whether to do battle. As 2 of them remain steadfast and draw their own swords, their companions are now fleeing the scene at a pace, disorientated and panic-stricken. As the leonine beasts, the 2 braver scouts who stood their ground, they begin to tense up and ready for battle. But the moment is over too quickly for them to handle, as all the beast does is deliberately barge into their horses, almost effortlessly sending both the men and their horses hurtling to the sides with his wildly superior body strength. The beast clearly had different plans, and he immediately pulled the bow off his back and produces 3 arrows that seem to have something glowing at their tip. With expert proficiency, he holds each of the arrows between his fingers as he readies them to be fired, and then releases them into the air, heading towards the 2 scouts who are still fleeing on their horses. In the distance, he then sees a bubble of greenish-yellowish light burst from the arrows as they make contact with the ground, with the sound of thunder, and the 2 fleeing men are hurled off their horses with groans of pain. They're clearly wounded and barely mobile. And then, as the beast turns its attention back to the 2 men, it's already knocked to the floor, whose horses have now fled out of sheer fear and left their riders behind to cower before this predator of the desert. It approaches them, slowly enough to be truly menacing and grinning all the while. One of the men still has his sword in hand, but neither of them look as brave as they did before as they shake. When the beast is finally before them, the armed scout tries to strike at the creature, but is immediately parried with enough force that the sword leaves his hand. And then, as the 2 men give up and accept their fate, the beast raises his blade and wreaks its punishment with one brutal swing of its sword. Back in the main throne room of Hyrule Castle, several attendants of the court, such as the king's advisors and various ambassadors of Hyrule Court, are standing around an empty throne and chattering in anticipation. Amongst them are the Chancellor and Bartos, the king's closest advisors, who are discussing the return of the scouts the king commissioned to investigate the desert. It hasn't been a full week yet, and not all the scouts were seasoned veterans. Perhaps they've simply been held up in their return journey and have stopped at an inn for recuperation, says Bartos. Nonsense, the Chancellor barks back at him. Gerudo is at most a 2-day journey from here. There's no reason why they shouldn't have returned yet. No, it's night time we called this meeting with the princess. We'll have to fill the gaps in her own experience and knowledge, and the scouts aren't the only thing we need to discuss with the princess. With this, Bartos looks at him questioningly. There's also the matter of the hero of time, continues the Chancellor. We need to begin the search as soon as we can. I only hope Zelda is able to keep up with these developments. I fear her naivety may leave Hyrule weak at a time like this. The gathered guests then become silent as the footsteps of a procession of maids and servants is heard from the rear side of the room, with the princess in tow. Once the princess is seated, the Chancellor, who is standing in the foremost position amongst the guests, steps forward and is about to begin speaking before he's stopped by Zelda. Chancellor, I thank you for calling this meeting today. I was due to call one myself, as there are clearly urgent matters to discuss. Before I let you begin speaking, however, I must ask that I'm first able make an announcement." With this, Zelda begins speaking to the entire room. "My fellow citizens of Hyrule, we've all heard of the ominous happenings around the world as of late, and Hyrule Court has not been complacent in dealing with this. I myself have been doing much reading as of late to inform myself of our options." As she says this, she looks over to Seha, who returns her look with a friendly nod, before continuing, "And I've decided it is time for Hyrule to begin its search for the prophesied hero of time." With this announcement, the room becomes ablaze with chatter, albeit light chatter, as all guests are still focused on the princess. The Chancellor looks over to Bartos, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Those of you who are familiar with the legends," continues Zelda, "will know that it is often prophesied that at Hyrule's greatest time of calamity, a hero will appear to guide us to victory. It is my belief that that calamity has arrived, and so we must seek our hero. And I've decided that I will be embarking on that search myself." The Chancellor is alarmed by this and interrupts. "But my princess, such a search would no doubt be perilous for a young lady of the court," he exclaims, with some condescension in his tone. "Would it not be wiser to send others in your place? There are men of the court far more equipped for this task, Your Highness." Zelda, who has picked up on the Chancellor's tone and is somewhat offended by it, tries successfully to hide her offense and continues respectfully and mildly. She explains that she appreciates the Chancellor's concern, but that it's imperative that a member of the royal family is present on the search, as it's important to instill hope in the people of Hyrule and its surrounding kingdoms. She then explains that she won't be going alone. She will of course take a few guards, her maid Saha and her guardian knight Link. To this, the Chancellor also objects, claiming that Link is far too inexperienced to be able to protect Zelda on such an important mission, and she should at least take her father's guardian knight, Gaston, in place of Link. "Good Chancellor," she responds, "I've put much thought into this decision. It was not made in brashness. Although I have the utmost respect for Gaston, I will be taking Link, not only because Gaston's presence here at my father's side will help provide assurance of the king's safety for those at this court, and not only because it's important for all royal parties to develop a relationship of familiarity and routine with their guardian knight, but also because it's important for both Link and myself to become familiar with Hyrule and its people. If we're both going to serve the kingdom, the princess's reasons are too well thought out." The Chancellor clearly wasn't expecting such a fortified rebuttal from this young lady of the court. With this, he concedes, but with a few final words. "Of course, Your Highness. I simply seek to guide the princess in her journey, as we wouldn't want to see you repeat some of your father's mistakes." With this last sentence, Zelda is clearly cast aback, and her patience for the Chancellor has perhaps now run out. "Thank you for your guidance, Chancellor. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate Hyrule must act fast, and this meeting cannot go all evening. I do hope I can make time for the other attendants here as well." With this, she turns away from the Chancellor and towards the rest of the room, looking for questions. Later that evening, Princess Zelda pays her ailing father a visit in his chamber. As she sits with him, they discuss her recent plans and revelations. Her father, whilst being somewhat cautious of his only daughter, embarking on such a journey for the first time in her life without him, is still nonetheless supportive. "I'm glad you're bonding with your guardian knight," he says. "You seem to have taken a bit of a liking to him, haven't you? Tell me, what is it that enamors you with him so much? Is it his way with words?" With this, the king gives his daughter a cheeky grin, who meets his gaze with some humor before responding. She explains her reasons to him and outlines her plan to visit only Hyrule's neighboring kingdoms in her search. After a brief moment, Zelda's father reminds her of something they'd recently discussed, the question of her marriage. He explains to her that he'd always hoped that she'd be married by the time he passes, and with his current weak state, he can't help but worry for her as a maiden. But Zelda is resolute in her decision. She explains to her father that she simply can't think of marriage or weddings at a time like this, a time when Hyrule could be in such danger. Her father reluctantly concedes to her logic. The next day, Zelda and her maid Saha are traveling in carriage to Link's training academy. When asked why she chose to do this, the princess explains to Saha that it would only be prudent to clarify Link's qualifications with his masters if he is to accompany Zelda on such a journey. When they arrive at the academy, however, Zelda is greeted with a celebrity's welcome by the students, who all stand around and fawn over her in awe. Zelda's personable and warm nature take over, as she seems to dedicate most of her time speaking with her new admirers. Saha is quick to notice this, and reminds Zelda of her objective to liaise with Link's masters. But Zelda is already too entrenched in the crowd of excited students to really break away. On their journey back to the castle, however, Saha doesn't miss the opportunity to remind Zelda that she would have been able to learn a lot more about Link's skills and qualifications if she hadn't spent so much time with the students. Zelda, however, doesn't seem too attentive. She meekly responds to Saha that she was also able to find out a lot about Link from his fellow knights in training, and she seems to be stuck in an almost melancholy mood. Upon returning to Hyrule Castle, Zelda immediately calls a meeting with Link to discuss their impending journey. They meet in one of the castle's courtyard gardens, and when she first sees Link, she watches him with the same sad gaze she's had all evening. When they begin speaking to discuss their plans, she doesn't mention her recent visit to his academy. Instead, she discusses with him the itinerary for the journey, and also produces a list of the names of the regions which they plan to visit. She hands Link the list, and he looks over it. On the list, the following names are written: Zora Domain, Death Mountain Kakariko Village, Gerudo Town, Rito Village. After this, there is a space, and beneath the space, some more names are written: Tabantha Ruins in Tabantha Region, Hebra Mountains, Farron Region, Lost Woods, and lastly Akala Region. The princess explains to her guardian knight that the 5 names at the top of the list are neighboring regions to Hyrule and good, trustworthy allies, so they'll be visiting these regions. The other places further down the list are further away from Hyrule, but significant points of interest, some of which they may have time to visit on later journeys. Once this is settled, Zelda and Link speak briefly about their anticipation towards their upcoming adventure. The princess, of course, does most of the talking, with Link simply affirming some of her points with short responses and nods of his head. The following morning, the princess and her guardian knight head out on their journey together towards Death Mountain, home of the boisterous and bold Gorons, to begin with. Accompanying them are a pair of knights and Saha. Zelda and Saha are being escorted in the royal carriage, whilst Link insisted on traveling on horseback, his knight's training clearly leaving a mark on him. As they set out on their journey, Zelda watches quietly as Link slips a small, carefully carved wooden boat into his satchel. She remembers what Saha had mentioned about the miniature boat she'd seen Link unpacking in his room, but she holds her tongue. There's no need to ask him about it now. The moment passes, and they continue forward, the weight of unspoken things hanging lightly between them. As Princess Zelda and her royal troop travel towards Goron City, home of the friendly Gorons, they can see Death Mountain from a good distance away. Looming large on the horizon, its towering peak dominating the skyline with an imposing presence. From afar, the mountains seem to smolder, a constant plume of smoke and ash curling into the sky. The rocky slopes were a treacherous expanse of jagged crags and steep inclines, snaking their way down to the lower elevations. Nestled within the harsh environment of the mountain, the Gorons had made their home. These sturdy, rock-eating creatures were perfectly adapted to the extreme conditions. Their settlement, Goron City, was a marvel of resilience and ingenuity, built into the very rock of Death Mountain, amongst massive stone structures and pathways that wound through the rocky terrain. The city is a bustling hub of activity by the time our royal travelers arrived. When they arrive, they are greeted by Daruk, familiar champion of the Goron tribe, who extends a typically spirited welcome to them all, as well as a group of Goron children, ecstatic over the princess' presence. Daruk is particularly pleased that the princess herself has come to visit, and recalls that the last time she visited may have been as a child. He's so delighted, in fact, that he even reminds her that he was present at Hyrule Palace on the day of her birth, and he still remembers it. The princess is clearly somewhat of a legend amongst the Gorons. After exchanging a few warm words, Zelda is keen to remind them that they have important business to discuss, and so they seek a hut to confer in private. When the group are alone, Zelda lays out her plans to seek out Hyrule's hero of time. She discusses plans with Daruk to assemble the best warriors of Goron City, but he's quick to exclaim that there won't be any need, since he is well aware of the prophecies surrounding the hero of time, and believes there's no one in Goron City or its neighboring villages that would match that. Description: apart from one potential candidate. After being questioned by the princess about who he might have shortlisted for the title, Daruk begins to share with the princess some of the prophecies he's aware of. "Well, princess," he exclaims bravely, "isn't it obvious? Think about it. What do the ancient scripts of the Shieka tribe tell us about the hero of time?" Zelda leans forward, listening to Daruk attentively. "Well, isn't it said in the scriptures that the hero of time would be someone essential to the royal family's functioning? And as you know, the king and myself have always had a very good relationship. He even seeks my help and advice sometimes. Mainly on things rock-related, but hey, rock-related issues are a big pain." With this, he slows his pace and turns to Zelda, and with an almost tender voice he asks, "Have you got any rock-related issues you've been meaning to discuss?" Zelda nods politely, but with a contemplative look on her face. She's clearly thinking over Daruk's words before he responds with, "Right, of course, that's reassuring. But I'm always here to help, if you do but wait. It's not only that," he continues. "See, the prophecies also say that the hero of time would present himself at Hyrule Castle in person, just around the time when Hyrule's great strife begins." With this, he begins gesturing towards himself with his hands. "Eh? What do you think? Probably the first guest to greet you at your birthday party, right? Me and Yunobo? That's gotta mean something." Zelda is not only invested in Daruk's words, she's also impressed by his knowledge on the matter, and tells him so. "My, you really have been studious in your pursuit of this matter, Daruk. It's such a great help. I thank you for what you've told me about the hero of time, and I shall certainly bear in mind your suggestion." With this, of course, Zelda feels the need to remind the Goron champion that she owes it to Hyrule and to the other kingdoms in the light world to visit and scout as far and wide as she can. In his usual manner, Daruk is perfectly understanding and supportive. When their meeting is over, Daruk is walking the princess to the hut where she will be staying for the night. As they walk, they begin to discuss Zelda's father, and Daruk reassures her that her father will be fine. He begins to lament on the king's past. "You know, if your dad was in good health," he says, "he'd know exactly what to do right now. I've never doubted him for a moment, no sir. Now, I know some naysayers have had their criticisms in the past, especially after the last calamity." As he speaks, Daruk can sense a feeling of discomfort for Zelda, requiring him to dance around the topic he's speaking about. "But the way I see it, the king did the best he could in the circumstances. The best anyone could have done, really. Your father's only mistake was underestimating his enemy, that's all. And that comes from good nature. It's not a flaw, it's a good thing in a ruler." Zelda thanks him for his kind words, but doesn't seem too eager to continue the subject, and so Daruk drops it. The next morning, when Zelda and her company meet with Daruk again, with a plan to discuss their travel route with Daruk, in the hope that he can offer some guidance, Daruk is in an apprehensive state. He explains to the princess that he's worried about his son Yunobo, who recently ventured out towards the abandoned North Mine, just to the north of Goron City, in hopes of seeking out painkillers stored there for the Goron boss, Bludo. He's been gone a few hours now, and Daruk is worried that he might have gotten stranded due to conditions and potentially hostile creatures. Upon hearing this, Zelda immediately expresses her concern and offers to help Daruk in any way she can. Then an idea comes to her. She suggests that her guardian knight and Daruk head towards the mine to look for clues. She feels certain that Link will be of assistance. As Link and Daruk arrive at the abandoned North Mine, the air is thick with heat and the sound of distant cries. As they begin to ride a minecart, they speed down the track, constantly scanning for Yunobo. "Hang on, Yunobo. We're coming." Daruk's voice boomed, filled with determination, as his eyes dart around for his kin. As they hurtle forward, they're ambushed by villainous creatures known as fire keys, bat-like monsters engulfed in flames. Daruk swings his hammer with devastating force, smashing rocks and the fire keys alike. Link's sword flashed, deflecting fireballs with his shield. They also encounter moblins on the path, tall and gangly beasts, which wield their own clubs as weapons. "Link, watch out," Daruk shouted as he hammers a moblin with a single blow. Ahead, however, they realize the track is broken, leading straight into a lava pool. As Daruk's fear grows, Link's eyes catch sight of a parallel rail with an unmanned minecart. Daruk also points it out, but screams out that they'll never have time to jump into it. With the swiftest of motions, however, Link uses his sword to hook into the handle grip of the parallel cart as they passed it, ensuring it moves in tandem with them. With the cart now speeding alongside them, Daruk is able to leap first into the parallel cart, then pulls Link over just in time. Their original cart plummets off the rails and into the lava with a sizzle. Their new cart surges forward and it enters a tunnel, but soon rocks begin to fall from the ceiling. Although Daruk is able to smash many rocks to pieces with his hammer, he can't do much with the rocks falling from directly above them. He has a great idea, however. "Link, use your shield," he commands. Link raises his shield, covering both of them as rocks pelt down. The shield deflects the debris and keeps them safe as they press on. As they exit the tunnel, they now catch sight of Yunobo. The young Goron is trapped under a rock, but just ahead of him, they see a final group of moblins blocking their path. With a mighty roar, Daruk leaps from the cart, smashing his hammer on the ground. Shockwaves knock the moblins off balance, allowing Link to dispatch the stunned enemies with precise sword strikes. "Yunobo," Daruk yelled as his son struggles to become free. Daruk lifts the rock effortlessly, freeing Yunobo. Link helps him into the cart, and they begin their return journey, now free of monsters. "Thanks, Dad. And you too, Link," Yunobo said, his voice shaky but grateful. As they rode back, Daruk clapped a hand on Link's shoulder. "You did good, kid. Quick thinking with that sword." Link nods, stoic as ever but courteous. The trio ride back towards safety, the bond between them strengthened by their shared ordeal. When Daruk, Link, and Yunobo return to Goron City, there's an audible sigh of relief from the villagers and the royal visitors awaiting them. After the commotion dies down, however, and everyone is at ease, the princess decides it's time for her troopie to leave for their next destination. That evening, as Zelda and company are preparing to leave for Zora Domain, Daruk and Yunobo are bidding them farewell at the entrance to Goron City. Just before they say their final goodbyes, however, Daruk suddenly remembers that he has a gift to present to Link to thank him for his help the day before. He presents a brown satchel to Link, and as Link curiously looks inside, he explains that it's full of microbombs. "Yes, that's right," he says to Link proudly, "the newest innovation in bomb technology, courtesy of the Goron people." He sees Link's a little confused, and so explains. Well, the Goron people realized that the traditional bomb flowers that grow around Death Mountain aren't the most portable things in the world. They're kind of heavy, even for mammoths like us. So me and Gortram, our seasoned blacksmith over there, came up with this, and it's even lighter and more compact than our bomb shoes. As Daruk gestures in the direction of Gortram, they see him standing in front of his hut, banging away at something laid out on his workbench with a huge hammer. Daruk then takes a moment to whisper to Zelda, "I did all the work." As he continues to explain how to use the microbombs and how to detonate them, he notices Gortram now approaching them, and again turns to Zelda and whispers, "Okay. Maybe not all the work, but at least half." After this, Daruk, Yunobo and Gortram thank the princess for her visit again, and bid them farewell. As the sun begins to set for the day, and our travelers head towards Zora Domain, just before they reach their destination and disembark from the famously scenic and expansive Inago Bridge, Link notices something that catches his eye. He stops to inspect what looks like a discolored, slightly indented rectangle of space on the bridge, and immediately recognizes it to be an area where once there would have been a plaque of some sort. As one of his fellow travelers passes him, he stops to confirm Link's suspicion of a missing plaque, but doesn't pay too much attention to it. Link, however, remains intrigued, and before continuing the journey, is struck by a strange feeling that he's only really scratched the surface of all the eerie mysteries that lay hidden in Hyrule and the Light World. He looks around briefly for the plaque that may have fallen off, and sees only trees, swaying slowly in the whispering wind. End of episode 2. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, coming this Tuesday. And share with others who love a great tale about our favorite legendary hero.